This morning we have our Canadian content. This entire panel is Canadian. Only two of the panelists have Canadian accents. I'll start with Gordana Slepcev. She's from Anaconda Mining. It's probably easy to go around the other side because there's proper steps there. That's a safety share for today. Head right when you're heading to the stage. It's Gordana Slepcev from Anaconda in the Maritimes of Canada. We have Nathan Stubina. He's the Managing Director of McEwen Mining, based in Toronto. And Carl Weatherell, he's the CEO of CEMI, the Canadian Council for Mining Innovation. And I'm Doug Morrison. So just a little bit about CEMI. We started about 10 years ago. And when we were started, everybody in the organization had a PhD or was a researcher. I took over about 6-7 years ago. And today, we have no PhDs. I'm the only person with any kind of technical background in mining and experience in mining, and everybody else understands business. They're business professionals. Because for us, innovation is not about the technology. Innovation is about improving the business and helping companies to understand how their product or service will improve how mines perform economically. Mines don't close because we have unfortunate accidents, fatal accidents. We don't close because we have tailings dam failures. We close because we fail to offer investors adequate return on investment. That's why mines are closed. That's why mines are closing. And that's why so few mines are opening, because we're not offering the best return. Innovation is the only way for us to redress that balance. And so that's what we're going to talk about this morning. And I have all the questions that you have on your cheat sheet, and I'm going to start asking those questions. Now, it's so much more comfortable to be in the position of asking questions, not having to answer them. So I get to sit in the chair and ask questions. So now I'm sitting in my comfortable chair, and you're perched on the uncomfortable benches. I'm going to start with, instead of asking the first question, I'm going to replace that with a statement. I don't actually think that we're raising the bar on innovation in the industry across the board. There are undoubtedly bright lights somewhere in the industry, but across the board, I think it would be hard to say that we were an industry that is raising the bar on innovation. So I'm going to start with the first question, which is really, why is that the case? Is it just because there's a shortage of capital? Is it because there's a shortage of people, shortage of ideas? I'll start with you, Gordana. What do you think?
Well, we've seen, as you mentioned, that there are some bright spots. Of course, there are companies that are doing a lot, and even the first panelists, that between them, there are many other ones that are actually doing, applying automated trucks, autonomous trains, applying artificial intelligence, using VR to move, to improve the process, to move, let's say, the rock from exploration phase down to the mill and the tailings, and then to the dory bar or whatever the companies are producing. I think the industry has been in such a distress in the last 5 to 6 years that people are scared to do something different that may fail, to be honest. Like, Anaconda is maybe a little bit different company, as we're a junior miner, we're fairly small, and we're fairly open to innovation, probably get a little bit of opportunity to talk about it, because there are options to actually get the funds, get the capital to do the stuff if you're open to change, if you're honest about it. I think the change has to come from the miner. Realize there are opportunities. What are the best opportunities for the company at the time?
Okay. To slip from Gordana to Nathan, what do you think, Nathan?
Yeah, I agree. I guess we're the pessimistic panel here. I wrote an article a few years ago for the Northern Miner called Is Mining Innovation an Oxymoron? And I'll save you the time. The answer is yes. I agree, there's lots of, isolated incidents, but overall, it's not shortage of capital. There's lots of ways, and a lot of these ideas aren't really that expensive. It's not really a shortage of ideas. There's a myth, there's a shortage of ideas, but every couple of days someone's phoning me up with some bright idea. I agree with Leslie. I think it's more the people we attract to this industry tend to be linear thinkers, engineers, accountants, project managers. We don't attract the innovation type, and there's lots of studies that show this. And I think we're just not diverse of thought, let alone gender, which you can see in this room, or immigrants, or whatever the studies show. I truly believe it's the people side. We don't attract the diversity of thought.
Cool. I'm going to add a little bit to that. A couple of things. One is what we call the tyranny of short-termism. Mining companies are driven to quarterly results, and it's a little hard to be innovative looking at 10 to 20-year changes if you're driven by quarterly results and have to have returns. There's a CEO of a mining company 2 years ago at one of our forums talking about how he was trying to get a $10 million implementation of technology and got a lot of pushback, a significant amount of pushback from the board. For $10 million, significantly changed, lots of ROI, et cetera. So this tyranny of short-termism, you see the gold prices recently dropped a little bit, and a number of companies that started scrambling. So let's get short-term results, but we want to be innovative. The second side, the flip side to that, and Nathan and I talk about this a lot, is that drives towards incremental change. So if you look at innovation in any other industry, the 70-20-10 rule that Eric Schmidt came out with Google years ago, 70% of investments in virtually every other industry is put into the incremental stuff. I would say we put 99% of our investments in innovation in incremental, and on the 10% side, virtually nothing, the transformational piece. So there's those two pieces right there that are causing us challenges. And again, just the definition of innovation. I don't think many people really understand how transformative it is. Last piece, and it's been talked about, is collaboration. I'm a bit different, a bit of an oddball in this room because I haven't worked in the mining industry except as a student for 4 months, and that's about it. But I've worked in a lot of other industries, software, microelectronics, astroparticle physics, defense, and actually helped set up 2 business ecosystems. We do not collaborate. We talk about it, but we just don't do it as an industry. There's no burning platform for this industry to collaborate as an industry. In forestry got together as an industry because it was going to die. The oil and gas industry, same thing. Software, microelectronics industry, because they saw the horizon, so they got together to collaborate on what the roadmap would look like for the future, space, et cetera. We don't do that. We're getting there. We've made a lot of progress, but we don't do it at the level we need to.
I mean, in some ways, it seems like we're trapped in our own mythologies that every operation, every mine is completely different. You could say about forestry, well, all forestry companies are cutting down trees, but mines are not all mining the same commodity. Some are mining iron ore, some are mining coal. At the top end, you have gold. What we tend to have right now, however, is a range of production levels from 1,000 ton a day narrow vein gold mine to 100,000 ton a day underground block cave mine to a 200,000 ton a day open pit operation, but very, very much exactly the same technological production platform across 2 orders of magnitude. Now, does that strike anybody as strange that across 2 orders of magnitude of production targets, we have exactly the same technology platform? I understand why it's convenient for the companies that make that equipment to want to sell it across all those operations, but it doesn't strike me as a sensible thing. Another thing that came up this morning was the mythology that we want to lay people off, so that's why we want automation. It's completely the opposite. The reality is we cannot attract enough young people to our industry, and we will not be able to continue to operate the way we do now if we do not automate a lot of the things we do. In Canada, at least, the replacement rate for engineers and geologists, and even for tradesmen, millwrights, heavy-duty mechanics, is roughly 20% plus or minus 5. That's the replacement rate from our education system into the industry. That's a demographic cliff that we approach year after year after year, and yet is barely discussed amongst the industry. So we have these myths within our business. For example, short-termism. Any public company has to make quarterly results. We're not unusual in that. Our business is not unusual in having to make quarterly results. Why is it that that is then used as an excuse why we can't innovate versus other people can? Any ideas?
Well, just a comment. If you look at the tenure of a CEO in our industry, it's like 3.5, 4 years. So, right there, we're asking someone to look at maybe a 5 or 10 year project when they won't be around. So when I started, we had annual reports for our companies. Now they're quarterly reports. So Carl's right there, that doesn't help drive innovation either. There's lots of reasons.
Just a couple of things on that. A good example of outside the industry is IBM. The former CEO of IBM, Sam Palmisano, refused to have quarterly calls and issue quarterly reports because they were adamant, and he was driving the company towards 5-year targets. No quarterly reports. Do quarterly calls with investors, keep them happy. So he made that change. The tone here has been a little bit we're behind, and there are challenges. But what we are seeing. I mentioned before we don't collaborate enough, but we are seeing mining companies starting to get together, and it's starting to accelerate. We are seeing some companies are looking longer term, but it's not as an industry. They're a select few, and they're starting to take off and jump ahead of the industry. Hopefully, in the next couple of years, we're going to see more and more of that. But as an industry, we have to get together as an industry and drive things forward.
Gordana, do we even see any coordination amongst mines that produce the same commodity? Gold mines, for example, nickel, copper, high-grade nickel, copper, low-grade nickel, copper. Do we see that level of collaboration happening?
I think it happens only depending on personal connections. So if you have connections with other companies, of course they're open to and willing to share. But I think majority of the collaboration we've been seeing is with university, with service providers, with research associations as well. So all the work we've been done on any other projects like fragmentation in place, that's been done with collaboration with the industries, with the universities and with all the research corporations. Of course, the other companies are willing to talk only high level. I mean, there is certain fear that other companies may, steal your IP, may, take your results, implement them, get better or faster. It's a competition, but something that people have to realize: if we don't get together, we're all gonna die as an industry very, very fast. The second thing is most of the projects, and some projects are short-lived. So sometimes to get the return on the investment is going to take 3 years, and nobody wants to wait for 3 years. Things may change, Nobody wants to invest on that long term, except maybe few that are really having a vision. I think it comes to the vision, the company's vision, what they want to do in the future. Is this like 5 years project or this is 50 years project? I think that's what the company and the leadership decides, because beside one mine, there are other mines too, and technologies are transferable. So if you use this at this mine, there is next open pit, there is next underground mine. So I think it comes to the mindset.
I just want to challenge the premise of that argument. When I started, every mining company, major mining company, had an R&D center. My first job was the Falconbridge Tech Center. There was the Alcan Research Center, the Noranda Research Center, the Placidome Research Center. They're all gone. Either they're now some commercial lab or they're just been razed to the ground. So we've been forced into collaboration. I'm not arguing if it's good or bad, that's just the way it's shifted. But in my opinion, I think the disruption will come from outside. First from the consumer, as we saw, Apple, no mining, and all the millennials and 6 billion people or 7 billion people will think mining is bad. Apple says no mining. Then it'll come from government. So as soon as the government bans the ball mill or bans a truck or bans something, then we're forced into change. Third, it'll come from someone outside the industry, James Dyson, Elon Musk, or whoever. Fourth, it'll come from some mining company. First, the juniors, and then lastly, the majors. So right now, this collaboration model is amongst the mining companies, but I think the disruption will come from anybody but the mining company. And that's why we'd have to bring in people outside mining if we want to collaborate.
Yeah, just to jump on two things here. One is, and to back up a little bit, again, the idea of collaborating and everything else, what we saw, and again, the change, what we saw, we put together a group of 60 executives from mining companies 5 years ago to talk about the future of underground mining. It took 5 years to get a project going. So building up that trust, the relationship, it takes time, right? But this was driven by mining companies. This is where we want to go. We did the same thing in surface mining. it took 6 months to get a project going because we'd built that trust. It's all this personal relationships, and it took off. We went from 60 companies to 5, right? Because others just basically, I don't want to collaborate with you. I'm not sure if this is going to work. I haven't collaborated with other people. And I'm going to challenge Nathan a little bit in that I'm seeing a couple, or we are seeing a couple of companies that are, the burning platform, as it were, internally to the companies, that if we don't change the business of mining, we won't have a mining business. There's a small group of companies doing that, majors, but not everybody. It's not pervasive, but there are a few that are doing that. And the last piece too, again, back to Douglas talking about, we're all different. And I think the previous panel talked about that. Mine sites are all different. Therefore, we're arguing why we can't use technologies between even mine sites within our own company. Is when we did this road mapping session, what's the future of surface mining look like? At the end of it, a couple of really interesting things happened in terms of how different we are. 2 very interesting things happened. One is everybody stood back and said, that could be underground mining as well. So the barrier between underground and surface and deep and ultra deep and everything was just broken right there. We tested that further at a CIM meeting in May. We had international people there, mining companies, and they basically said, why do you have 2 roadmaps? Surface and underground have similar challenges. Let's look at the similar challenges between these 2 different types of businesses. And the second thing that was really interesting is I did a Rudy Giuliani at the end of the day and said, so how do we do, right? And one of the miners, a hard rock precious metal miner, basically said, I came here because my boss told me to show up. I thought I was going to waste 2 days and have to work all weekend to catch up to it. But at the end of it, he said, I had no idea the challenges we have as hard rock miners were exactly the same as the guys over there in oil and gas. Had no idea. So these barriers of we are all different and we are all unique and we can't collaborate were just broken down within 36 hours. It was really cool to see. We're still trying to get the projects going, the platform changing projects, but seeing that mind shift happen really fast was just amazing. So it is happening, but it has to happen faster.
So where else do we see the potential to set up collaborative ecosystems that will work internally together to move change forward? Some people have said that you can see that happening in exploration. There might be some of that happening on the digital side, but on the physical side, there seems to be very little of that happening. Any other potential anywhere else?
Well, there are a few research centers over there in Canada, and some are in Laurentian, some on UBC, some are, of course, on the Memorial for people that are not present there. It's Newfoundland University, and also I've been engaged in some works with MRANS, or Mineral Research Association of the Nova Scotia. We're actually proposing a plan to the government to finance about $15 to $20 million expenditure in geophysics. Because the problem is with the juniors, they don't have the money to start all this work, like geophysics. It's expensive, and if they at least get the base to start working on something, then they can advance. And eventually juniors, our goal of all the juniors is to be bought or taken over by majors. So at the end of the day, if the government helps out juniors, it's eventually going to help the majors as well.
Yeah, jump in on that. The whole notion of ecosystem is a little interesting because an ecosystem is basically people in a similar geography randomly helping each other with no focused business goals. Whereas if you look at what other industries use, a business ecosystem is basically set up to harness innovation globally to solve big problems. So platform changing problems. How do we change the platforms of the industry? And at CEMIC, that's basically one of the components of the business model. Built the roadmaps, and we have a number of platform-based projects on the go right now. One of the we're getting the companies together. The challenge, the collaboration is happening. And we're starting to see changes with the suppliers, because that's a huge challenge in the industry, is this one-to-one transactional thing instead of we need to co-develop and solve problems together. That is starting to happen, but there's a lot of pushback from some of the larger OEMs. A few of them are getting it. The SMEs are jumping, they're all on board with this. There's a couple of examples of that, and I think, Nathan, you've done this with one of the suppliers out in Calgary. We're seeing that with some of the majors and some of the smaller companies, but again, the entire ecosystem, the business ecosystem has to change as well with the supply side. The academic side has to change how they work together as well. And if anybody's interested, a perfect example of a most recent business ecosystem is Facebook. Facebook is hosting a business ecosystem to create the new server technology of the future. New platforms. In 5 years, we're going to have a new server technology nobody would have dreamed of today. What are we trying to look at in the mining industry? How to get, somebody said in situ leaching this morning. How do you get rid of drill and blast? How do you get rid of shafts? How do you not discharge tailings? How do you do all this stuff to transform the business? That's what a business ecosystem is set up to do.
But if you look at that example there, in situ leaching, in situ recovery, how are you going to get the suppliers to be part of that ecosystem? There's no trucks, there's no blasting, well, there's blasting, there's no ball mills, there's no tailings, there's, you know.
They're different suppliers.
Different suppliers. Yeah, but
Nanotech.
But you know, if you're going to rely on the typical ones or the ones that are showcasing here, you know, they wouldn't be interested in that technology.
And that has to change.
Yeah,
right?
that certainly
A
has
new
to
suite of suppliers. And we're actually seeing that in the digital side. There's a whole new suite of suppliers coming in. There's people we're working with in continuous mining that are not typical, and more SMEs willing to change. So it's changing the supplier matrix.
But even you mentioned exploration, you know, we have a lot of internal barriers. If you look at the 43101, you have strict requirements for how to handle the core and how do you send that to an assay in the QA/QC. But let's say you have a technology that just goes down a drill hole and collects data. You don't have core, you have data. It doesn't fall under the 43101. How would you prove to the regulator you have this much nickel and you can recover that much nickel when you don't have core? So, you know, it doesn't fall under the typical.
Well, you can't, basically.
You can't.
No,
Yeah.
you can't. You're not allowed to. So, yeah, exactly. So we are limited in some respects by some of the regulations that we have to operate under, but the drive has to come from inside the industry. Rather, the drive has to come from somebody who wants to change the industry. And it seems what you're saying is there's too many players that have too much of a vested interest in changing anything.
I think everybody realizes that there needs to be change, and there's lots of technology and shiny things out there that would help us, but I don't think fundamentally we're at that point. Maybe you see a few.
We're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there, but you know, we're way behind other industries, and we have to get there a lot quicker, in my opinion.
And a key piece of that too was mentioned by one of the panelists previously, is the whole idea, and Gordana brought it up as well, is about the sharing. You've got to use an open innovation model where you're sharing and some sort information, not necessarily IP, information, and there's pushback on that. It's really interesting to see the pushback. Some companies just jump right in, and others are like, well, I can't share that. So it's coming. We're kind of on the inflection point of the curve, but we've got to push it over the edge.
I would say that we've been on that point of inflection several times in the past, and what happens, it tends to be a peak, and then we die off again for a while, and then it doesn't move forward.
We're trying to make sure it doesn't die off.
Yeah, we're trying to do that. In Sudbury, for example, we run a small ecosystem of about 70 companies, and 24 of those eventually got together, and while they started off as highly competitive SMEs, before the end of the 4 or 5 year program, they had actually begun to recognize business opportunities, business-to-business opportunities, not mobilized by anything that we did except to create that environment. And it seems to me that it's the business-to-business opportunities that are offer the greatest potential.
Yeah.
And unless you have companies that are prepared to, first of all, get together at a relatively low level to collaborate, then there's no way to get to that second level where you can then establish the B2B and B2B2B combinations that will actually move things forward.
Yeah, I would say it comes back to the people, you know, and aligning the objectives from the top to the bottom in the companies.
I mean, it's interesting, we said bringing it up with the academics. Yeah. The academic institutions, certainly in Canada, and I would imagine here in the US as well, are very, very thin as far as mining departments come. We have very few mining departments left. They're usually amalgamated into other things, whether it's resource evaluation or geology and resources, or resources and energy even, just to keep the thing, and even civil engineering in some places. So the opportunities for collaboration across the board are actually getting thinner as far as our particular industry is concerned. And for me, that seems to come from lack of investment from larger companies in making those things happen.
Actually, I'm going to challenge that a little bit in the sense of, again, similar to the supplier mix having to change, changing the academic mix as well. And we had this discussion with Leslie at Lausanne Institute is, you know, if you're looking at some of the challenges of the industry, for example, like water quality, that's not going to come from a mining department, right? Energy systems isn't going to come from a mining department. If you're looking at bioleaching or in situ leaching, that's going to be genomics and biology and chemistry. If you're looking at low energy recovery, that's going to be physics. So we've got to change the academic mix as well, and even on the IT side, right? You're going to be looking at computer science, electrical engineering. I had a conversation, one of the issues we identified was low-grade energy recovery, and there's a whole group of physicists at U of T looking at low-grade energy recovery. Nobody in the industry had even talked to them. The IT side of things, it was really funny a couple of years ago with digital coming up, and again, not coming from mining, is there's a lot of digital expertise, for lack of a better term, that exists. It has existed for decades. You know, I helped set up one of the first cybersecurity research labs in Canada 12 years ago. Like, it's there, there's expertise there. Some of the top data scientists in the world sit, not in Denver, unfortunately, but sit in select cities. But there's missing that connection to them. The academic mix isn't the mining schools. It's everywhere else.
But for the drive for the mining industry has to be to actually use that expertise.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
I've gone through 3 episodes where we've actually identified a really good technology at a university, promoted it, funded it to a certain point, but then they've actually realized that they can make more money with that technology in a different sector or a different business than they can in mining. One of them, just to be completely embarrassing, was they could actually make more money selling their product as food for budgerigards than they could selling it to the mining industry. So we're lower down than pet food on some of the food chains when you start to work with academics in other disciplines, because other industries are much more aggressive at identifying good technologies and then supporting it through to the point where they actually can adopt it. Many cases in the universities, people get tired of hoping that the slow rate of adoption in our industry seems to be one of the biggest killers of all. Any other ideas?
I agree with that. I mean, like I said, every couple of days someone phones me, and one of my first questions to them is like, well, why are you trying to adopt it in mining? You know, there's a lot more municipal water than there is mining waste. There's a lot more, you know, cement plants or whoever has to grind up materials, and it's always interesting, you know, to hear that answer, because eventually they'll phone back in a few months and say, oh, I'm tired of banging my head against the wall. Like, nobody understands what I'm trying to do here, and they'll try it in some other industry, and somebody will answer the phone there. So I agree with that.
Yeah, I'd say there is a slow rate of adoption, but it is, again, we're seeing change. And we're seeing change in terms, it's slow, but change in terms of going outside of the typical disciplines and looking for other things, bright, shiny objects from different disciplines. But it just takes time. And on the academic side, we're seeing the academia more interested in focusing what does the industry need versus trying to sell stuff in parallel in their own things. They're actually getting together. And there's a couple of, you know, recently launched network in Canada on additive manufacturing. They came to us and said, what does the industry need? So to try and get some focus and a pull from the industry versus typically pushing. So we are seeing those changes, just not pervasive.
Yeah, it comes back to, you know, whatever we invest in innovation, we have to see some sort of return. We're talking usually about economics, improving the output, improving the cash flow, but also to kind of touch back on some of the other things as the milieu is changing. Now, mining companies have to secure their license to operate. So it comes back to other things, how we do this better. Because, I mean, it's nice to have all these centers that you command from far, but then the basic human contact is the first thing. Look, we're all here listening to us. Somebody couldn't be on the conference call, right? So it comes back to listening, to collaborating, and people feeling good about what they're going to do. Because it kind of, all that removes some closeness and acceptance and buy-in, I would say. The more you dare, the more you talk with people, the more they consider. And it takes even, if you go back to the kids and how many times you have to repeat certain things for kids to remember, it takes 8 to 10 times, right? It comes back same to the mining industry. When people see they have the issue, you know, how can I solve this issue? If there are other options available at the market, they look into those. If those are more innovative, they look better, they give you better return. That's how everything's going to change. The product and the offering has to be better than what we've been using so far.
I'm going to ask the people at the back if they have a microphone there, just to see if there are significant questions from the audience that we can actually enliven the debate rather than just you listening to us for bandy negative ideas around.
While we're waiting, I'm going to add to the human side too on innovation in general. I've worked in about 20 consortia in multiple industries since 1988, and innovation and collaboration is all about people. It's all about psychology. It's 99.9% psychology and 1% is technology. Technology doesn't really matter. And basically, if you're going to innovate and collaborate, you have to trust. You know, as I say, I like to say, innovation happens at the speed of trust. It takes time to get there. And we're seeing that happening, but it's innovation is all human. It's all human dynamic. And if that doesn't happen, innovation is not going to happen. And that's whether it's at the board level, the CEO level, between organizations, with suppliers, with academia, with anybody else.
Okay. There's a question at the back.
Yes, my name is Calla Ruberg. I'm with Tech Resources in Canada. And there was a statement made that the mining industry does not collaborate. I'll give you some counter examples. One is the Mining and Metals ISAC, which is the Information Sharing and Analysis Center. There are over 20 mining companies, almost all members of the ICMM, in other words, very large members, Newmont among them, Goldcorp among them, obviously Teck, who constantly share in a collaborative way, in a structured way, in a formal way, all of the cyber threat information in this industry. I urge you to join, obviously, but because the more people do share, and we have in fact uncovered a couple of instances where one of the companies identified a breach potential, informed all the others, and basically saved all other 15 companies from FinTen. So, I mean, that's one formal example where we do collaborate very successfully. The other one is the Global Mining Guidance Forum, where many of the guidelines for, in fact, automated haulage and for any AI systems or systems generally is being discussed and promulgated. Now, it's very true that the larger OEMs don't tend to listen very well at this point, but they have a huge, investment and an invested body in software that they have to now basically change over if they were to listen to some of the guidelines. I think that's a common evolutionary attribute in any industry, whether it's in robotics or whether it's in manufacturing. So I wouldn't be too negative about our ability to collaborate. There are many other collaboration examples as well in the Hall area that are emerging, and in the communication space as well. So I think it's a pretty quickly advancing situation that we have in mining because it's been dormant for so long, and it's an amazingly exciting time. So I mean, take advantage of the collaboration that is going on.
Here, let me hit back at that one there. That has nothing to do with innovation. So you're talking about taking a diesel truck that's 30% efficient. The weight of the truck is twice of whatever it's calling, and half the time it's going around the pit empty, trying to get back into the pit, feeding a ball mill that's 5% efficient. So I could put a sensor on every truck, and I could put a sensor on every ball, and I could run this thing from Perth, and I can make sure that nobody's going to cyber hack this thing from wherever. At the end of the day, I've got a crappy truck feeding a crappy ball mill. So you're not innovating anything. I understand what you're saying, and I should collaborate. If I can get that ball mill from 5% to 6% efficient, that's a lot of money. 3% of the energy on this planet goes to ball mills and comminution. So if I can get from 5 to 6 to 7, that's great. I want to replace the ball mill. There's too many sponsors here from the truck company, so I won't talk about that.
No. If I could just add to that, yeah, Cal, you're absolutely right. There's lots of good examples of collaborations going on. You know, in GMG, we partnered with GMG on 2 of those guidelines. They were done in 6 months or 9 months instead of 4 years because of the collaboration. Cybersecurity, that happened because of something in I think it was the National Post about 3 or 4 years ago, and everybody else realized, oh my God, we were hit too, right? And you got the group together. But to Nathan's point, and that's good, that's all good stuff. And as I was saying, we do collaborate. We don't collaborate enough on the transformational side of the business.
Yeah, I'm not arguing against that.
No.
Do all that stuff. That's great.
It's fabulous stuff.
Fabulous stuff. That's not innovation.
And as I was saying, if you're going to change the business, you've got to get rid of drill and blast. You've got to get rid of trucks in the pit. You shouldn't have pits. You shouldn't have tailings. You shouldn't discharge water. You should have 100% energy recycle. And that's where it's harder to collaborate because it's a little further out and it's harder to get people around the table, and it takes significant amounts of money. It's happening, just not as fast as it needs to and as fast as we've seen in other industries.
Yeah, and again, on the innovation part, I'm going to have a debate about this a bit. So,
Awesome, good stuff.
you know, in comminution, there are things that are happening in the background that are unbelievably innovative.
Yeah.
I mean, in Toulouse, I just saw iPulse actually pulverize rock with power pulse.
That was from the 80s. Self-frag has been doing that.
Actually, it wasn't from the 80s. It's now. I mean, it took 15 years.
It was
to
developed in the 80s.
It takes a long time to get to a place.
The
Like,
diamonds
a
people
long
jumped
time.
on it. The concrete people jumped on it. The ruby people jumped on it. Hardly anyone in this room would know about self-frag or EPD. So, yeah, it takes time. That's our point. Everyone else has jumped on it. Mining hasn't. So, I'm glad you've seen it, but it's been around for decades.
Well, I don't think it actually has been around. That particular technology has not been around for decades, but regardless, you know, the thing is that it does take time, and one of the bigger issues that we have as an industry is that when the down cycles come, the very first groups to go are the innovation groups, right? And that's true for all industries, by the way. That's not unique in our industry. The problem is that our down cycles are really down, and they actually happen, you know, with some more frequency than in others. And I think that actually sets us back every time.
Yep.
And instead of being a step function where you actually are getting steps up every time during the up cycles, one tends to forget the times that were, you know, that preceded the down cycles, and you almost begin over again. And that's actually a pretty destructive cycle for innovation.
So Cal, while you're getting the mic over there to somebody else, on the iPulse, we approached iPulse 4 years ago to put them in front of 10 mining companies, and they refused because they wanted to operate in stealth mode and do one-to-one deals with companies. So, you know, I talked to the CEO a couple of times. We just put them on the back burner because they weren't willing to collaborate with a group of companies. So it is really cool technology. I've heard about it, haven't seen it. Love to get it to the industry, but their business model was just not right.
Hello. My name is Andy Reynolds. I advise mining companies and suppliers on partnership strategies for innovation. But I have a question that goes back to something Doug said right at the start, which we're in danger of missing, which is the relationship with investors. Yeah. And you know, if we treat investors as if they're customers, and some would argue we do, we provide an investment product. Customer choice drives innovation. And so the question is, how are those customers, those investors, how are they expressing choice that's driving innovation? What options are they being given? Are regulators artificially minimizing those options? Are they constraining it so that investors don't really have a way to express preferences? And how could it be better? How could we tap in more to the motive force of investors to really drive innovation?
Well, for example, in our case, McEwen Mining, people will invest in the company because they know we're willing to look at some new technologies. At our AGM, I get 15 minutes to talk about new technologies we're looking at. We have the McEwen Mining Innovation Lunch and Learn, where we bring in speakers, videotape it, and put it on the website and the CIM's website. So, you know, people who invest in our company know, you know, we're not a laboratory, or we're tinkering, but they know we're a little bit further out there. And on Anaconda, I would find a little bit out there. But they also know that some of the more conservative industries with, you know, 100-year mine life might not be on that same, don't fall in the same place on the spectrum. So I think the investors know which companies are interested in changing and which are just not, or talking about it.
There's a microphone just coming.
Good morning. My name is Elizabeth Stein. I'm a professor of mining and finance law at the University of Western Ontario in Canada. So I thought it's time that one of the academics from the audience has to say something as well. My point rather goes to a couple of themes that I've heard emerging here this morning, and I would like to link up with what the previous speaker had to say about the investors. It seems to me that there is an opportunity for innovation insofar as the investors are concerned, and that it has to do with a reputational problem that the mining industry is facing at this stage. You've made reference to the fact that there is too little uptake among the students, shall we say. And we see, of course, that there is also a problem in terms of investment with mining not necessarily having a good reputation all the time. But is this not maybe one instance where there should be more collaboration among mining companies as such, without the fear of sharing IP that may be stolen from one to another? And I pose this as a question to hear your feedback in that regard. Also to hear what role you think, if any, we from the university sides can play in that regard. As you can hear, I'm a lawyer, I'm not a miner. I am in natural resources. I'm particularly interested in taking a more interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary approach to this. Thank you very much.
Just before the panel here answers the question, I just want to point out that all the questions from the audience so far have come from Canadians. The purpose of this morning is not just to hear Canadians talking, it's actually to hear what everybody else thinks as well. So please go ahead.
Well, I think it goes back to building a company's reputation. All of that goes, like innovation, disruption, those are all good buzzwords, but it's the work that people recognize. You know, if you really put the effort, are you doing some research, what the results are, and we all have to realize sometimes research is not gonna work out. You're not gonna get your, return on your investment. But at least if we don't try, we're never ever gonna move on. And even from every failure I had in my life, and I had few, I learned perhaps more than from my successful projects. So the mining industry has to change the mind. We have to innovate, we have to change so we can survive. And I think investors in that respect are willing to invest the money in the companies that are changing, that are offering something different.
If you look, open up any search engine you want, it's like, I have a list of 60 tailings dams that have given away in the last 30 years. So on average, 2 a year. There's demonstrations in Lima and Santiago, no to mining, no to cyanide. I haven't seen a lot of demonstrations in downtown Toronto, let's mine. So we have to overcome that. Like I go around to a lot of schools, universities, and the tech guy's gonna hate this one, but people who are my son's age, he's 20, really think we go around on a mule with a pickaxe. Or we're going around with, making 6 million ounces of gold with panning for gold, So, and I go to universities and civil engineers come up to me, they have no idea they could apply to mining. Mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, all these are civil structures, trucks as big as this room. We need a lot of mechanical engineers, but they have no idea they could even apply. And if they do, they have a negative perception because of the Apple commercials and so forth. So I don't know if it's the job of the universities to, I was going to say brainwash, but to influence the younger generation. But they really do not have a very good opinion of this industry. And we don't help ourselves with, the negative, blogs that come out.
Maybe also to add up, the mining industry should create its own PR. That's really important. I think that's the next step. As you mentioned, everybody has bad feeling against the mining and how we did mining 15, 20, 30, 50 years ago. There is a lot of legacies, but things have changed, and all these good things that are done don't usually come up in the public. So I think that's another system that the mining companies have to work on. That's a positive PR on the mining
It comes back to the fundamental question, who are our stakeholders, right? I think George at the start said, talked about the Apple thing, right? Are our stakeholders just the investors in the communities, or is it much broader in the downstream purchasers of what mining produces turns into products? So I think, and Ian Pierce and I had this conversation last March, is the stakeholder mix has changed. Understanding the stakeholders are the people on the street in Toronto, the people who buy cars, the people who buy iPhones, changing that. And you asked also what can academia do? Thought leaders and independent voices, right? That's the two biggest roles that you can play. And you did say integrated, not multidisciplinary. Tying multiple things together is actually what's needed significantly.
Okay. Do we have a question or a comment from someone in the audience who is American?
No, go ahead.
Because Janice was about to ask a question, but she's from Canada too.
Or if she's from the government.
Over here.
Thank you. I'm Martin Lurie, and this is a genuine American accent, and I'm with ThyssenKrupp Industrial Solutions in Denver. My question is, when we look at new products, new systems, we wonder what kinds of rules of thumb do folks apply in evaluating the advantage that those innovations need to have in order to make their way in the industry. So they have to have significant advantages in terms of CapEx, in terms of OpEx, or in terms of safety. And I'm wondering if anybody on the panel has looked at the kinds of numbers that come out that mean an innovation can go forward and make its living in the industry. Thank you.
Well, you're battling, everybody wants to be first to be second, right? So you come out with a new product and, where has it been used in gold? Where has it been used in gold in Mexico? Where has it been used in gold in Mexico in Sinaloa? And then finally you can't answer those questions, and it's like, well, we'll let someone else try it. So it's not really the ROI or it's really no one wants to take the risk of being the first. I can name you 1,000 plants that use a ball mill, and I can name you, one person dabbling in iPulse. So, it's that, as soon as it's proven somewhere, everybody's gonna want it. So what you have to do is buy some gold mine for $10 million, try it out there, and the worst you're gonna do is break even selling gold from a $10 million gold mine. You can't lose. So, you're gonna have to demonstrate it either on a small scale at someone's mine, like us, who are willing to test things out quite readily, or just show it somewhere. But if you just come with a document that shows this is the ROI and this is the risk, you'll be banging your head for years.
I think you have hit on a very important question, though, and it does connect back to the investor position. And it is our internal perception of risk. We tend to always say that innovation is a high-risk enterprise. In actual fact, when you think about what our industry does, we extract a finite resource, and as we go deeper, our costs are escalating. If you keep on doing those things year in, year out, your ROI has to be being eroded if you use the same process. Year by year by year, if you continue to do the same thing in exactly the same way, in a mine that's getting deeper and hotter and more logistically complex, this is not a risk of eroding your ROI, it is an absolute guarantee of eroding your ROI. So our perception of risk is, innovation is risky, as if doing nothing was zero risk. Our business is not built on zero risk. Everything we do has lots of risks attached to it. And until we change our perception of risk and what that means to our business, we will be stuck in this ongoing loop that innovation is the riskiest thing you can do. Absolutely not. The riskiest thing you can do is to keep on mining deeper and deeper with exactly the same process and not change anything. But that's exactly what we do year in, year out. The fact is, for everybody on the stage and everybody we heard this morning, nothing else in your life is the same technology you were using 35 years ago. But essentially, since underground mines moved to bulk stoping, with backfill or not with backfill, The same equipment platform that we started to use in about 1985, 86 is the same one we're using to do. We've had some bells and whistles here and there, but it's fundamentally the same platform. And there is nothing else you do in your entire lives that continues to rely on 35-year-old technology platforms. That's the fundamental issue. And if we ask a question about the demographics of our business and why people are not joining, what they're actually telling us is, this is a boring, old-fashioned industry. We internally know that it is not. But the external potential in the economy as a whole says to young people, that's boring and stays the same. Let's go do something more interesting.
Well, let me
And that's
put it
what's
to you this
tackling
way,
our
like,
business.
full disclosure, my daughter works for Dyson. So if I had James Dyson here and I said, in Mexico, we're chasing 0.7 grams per ton gold with a strip ratio of 10 to 1. I have to move as much earth as in this room to make a 1 ounce loony gold coin. And we're recovering 60% of that gold. That makes sense to no one except the people in this room. So if James Dyson actually knew that, and he does not, he would, I'm sure he'd think of a better way to do it. But, that's our reality. 35-year-old technology.
We've got to wrap up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing to your question. Instead of asking what metrics does a company use, why don't you go to the companies and ask them how you can co-develop solutions? So it's more of a pull, so you're working together. And there's lots of examples of that. Kirkland Lake Gold has worked with Artisan to co-develop the first 40-ton haul truck, this battery electric vehicle. Torex worked with Meditech to create Muckahi. Goldcorp is working with FLD Smith to create EcoTail. So it's a co-development process versus I'm trying to sell my stuff. So switch the relationship around and you'll probably find a lot more traction, and you'll find out what the drivers are from within the companies.
Okay, well, thank you very much for all the questions, especially the question from the one lone American in the room. And join me in thanking the panel for their ideas. I hope you found it stimulating.